All right, so this story, of course, this part of the story is full of some more thematic elements that we need to look into, as well as a little bit more characterization about Jim, and a couple of key incidences, a little bit more about the setting, just so you can understand a little bit more about New York, but I probably won't highlight as much of it in this particular part, but just note that he's explaining to you a little bit more about how New York City is set up and where he's going. 3 blocks north, I turned left around the corner on the strange notion that I would head back to my hotel across the street from World Trade Center 1. Foolish. Heading west towards the West End Drive in the counterclockwise circle around the World Trade Center, I went into a store and purchased a Coke to alleviate my thirst. Inside, I filled my glass with ice, and the building roared and rumbled. It was not the natural rumble and earthquake that either rolls or joints you know. This was unnatural, chaotic. Running outside, I was told that World Trade Center 2, the building I was in half an hour before, had fallen. So this is our key incident here. And I want you to think about, how do you think this affects Jim? So this is the building that he was just in with those two ladies. So this is an important moment, and so in your box where you think about it, how do you think this affects Jim, that the building that he was just in is falling down around him? The dust cloud moved primarily south and east as the wind was blowing north that day. At the next intersection, I stood with 50 people and looked at the 110 floors that were now a pile of steel and people 60 feet high. I thought of Sandy and Liz's notes. So again, you got a little bit of characterization here, a lot of characterization, where you can learn a lot about Jim's personality, especially by the fact that he calls himself foolish. He's very reflective as he writes, which is beautiful. And he stops at this building. And then, of course, he thinks about Sandy and Liz's notes. So all this stuff is just some things that kind of tell you about it. And then, of course, there's a lot in here about New York City and where he's going. So you can look at some of the setting stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily worry about annotating about it. I continued in my fantasy world, heading west towards the water, towards my hotel. Reaching West End Drive, I found the staging area for the Fire Department of New York. Dressed like warriors, they were walking single file towards the behemoth of falling debris and the two towers and still standing in Tower 1. In the still standing Tower 1. The bravery and imagery of these men at the time will never leave me. Everyone was running away from the carnage, and they walked forward, determined to do their job. Amazing people, amazing courage. So this is, of course, a little bit of theme insight for us. Hopefully you're seeing a little bit of a trend. So at this point, I want you to start thinking about, what is the theme? So what is he actually focusing in on? So far he focused in on the fact that Sandy told him to evacuate. That other man rushed everyone else down the stairs, and now he's admiring these firemen. I want you to think about, what do those three things have in common? And that's kind of where your theme's coming in. So he's constantly talking about people and admiring people for what they did while they were in the building. So start thinking about what the theme might be here. What is Jim learning through all of this? Okay. I continued to stroll southward towards my hotel until a rush of people told me that moving forward was unrealistic and foolish. Since the cell phone towers were not working and the lines of the payphone were huge, I hopped into a payphone line and watched Tower 1 burn. So this, of course, is a key incident, and I'm just going to put key incident. I want you to think about why it's a key incident. But he just said that he stops and watches Tower 1 burn. And you just kind of have to think about, why would this be an important thing to note? As far as the payphone stuff goes, like I told you guys, this is 2001. Payphones are still a thing, because cell phones they're not new, but they're not well established yet. They're still they're on the up and up. So just kind of be mindful of that. So he has to hop into a payphone line. Then the end began. The antenna on top of the building tilted ever so slightly, and the building came down. It was fast, lasting 10 seconds. People were racing around me as I watching if the action were miles away and MSNBC was on the scene. Panic and fear in people's faces flashed by me as they sprinted past. At one point, a sliver of the building was standing above the rubble like a defiant finger to whoever had done this. The sliver was no more than 10 feet across, but soared 25 stories above the rubble, and then it too fell. So I'm going to go ahead and he focuses in on this particular incident. So I'm going to say this is a key incident. Particularly, we want to focus in on the sliver falling down finally. The way he says it, I feel like that's where you guys need to focus in on why is this important, because he puts emphasis on the fact that it fell. And then, of course, this is an apparent key incident because he's talking about the building, the other building falling down. All right. And with that, we have 2 more sections to go. So you will hear me talk about the refuge in the village. Not refuge. Refuge. Okay? Here we go.